Thank you to everyone in that last session for our MC, Emma Scragg, and all of our participants in the Owner Builder session. We had just over 600 people joining us for that session, which was great to see, and some great conversations happening in the chat. Before we head on into our next session, we just want to remind you all that you can see the full schedule for today on our website at sustainablehouseday.com/program. And while you're there, you can also see the 130 homes that have been open and watch their house profiles and the house tour videos. At the moment, we have 520 people joining us right now. We are so pleased to have you here, and we'd love to know where you're all tuning in from. So please share your locations in the chat, where around Australia or perhaps around the world you're joining us from. It would be great to see. Up next in our next session, the topic is creating sustainable communities, and this session will be emceed by the Sanctuary Magazine editor, Anna Cumming.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome to Sustainable House Day 2021. If you've just joined us, thank you for being here. If you've already watched a couple of sessions, the couple of sessions we've had today, my name's Anna, and I'll be your MC for this session, focusing on creating sustainable communities, eco-villages and co-housing. I'm speaking today from the traditional country of the Dja Dja Wurrung people in central Victoria, and I acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So as Erin said, I'm the editor of Sanctuary Modern Green Homes magazine, published by Renew, the organiser of Sustainable House Day. I have a long-standing interest in sustainable, energy-efficient and comfortable homes that tread lightly on the earth, and I really love being part of the mission to inspire and educate people about the design strategies, materials and systems available to achieve them. I think it's fair to say that over the last year and a half, as we deal with the upheaval of a pandemic, the importance of community and connections with others has really been brought home to many of us in a way that maybe it wasn't quite so immediate before. In fact, interest in collaborative housing models has been rising in Australia for a while, from just a couple of households to large eco-villages with a raft of shared facilities. Co-housing projects come in many sizes and types, but they all offer the social, financial and environmental benefits of sharing resources and building community. Today, we're going to explore this topic with our 4 panellists who are involved with eco-villages and co-housing developments in coastal Victoria, the Hunter Valley and near Margaret River in WA. Unfortunately, Graham Thomas from Christie Walk in Adelaide isn't able to join us after all, but I encourage you to go and look at the homes in that community that are open for SHD on our website, sustainablehouseday.com. So firstly, today we have Clint Hare, General Manager at The Cape, a sustainable development outside Cape Patterson in Victoria, where 8-star homes are the norm and over half the land is set aside as shared space. Hi, Clint. Please introduce us to yourself and your project. Can't hear you. No, still not getting you.
Sorry to interrupt there, Clint. You might just need to go next to where it has the mute button there, press the up arrow and see if you can select a different microphone. Nothing coming through just yet, sorry.
How about now?
That's
perfect.
Better. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Anna. So I'm Clint. I'm the General Manager of The Cape in Cape Patterson. We are Australia's first net zero carbon housing estate of scale, about 230 lots at Cape Patterson, which is about 2 hours south east of Melbourne, in near Inverloch and Wonthaggi, if you're familiar with those spots. We have been doing our development now since for 5 or 6 years, and we're getting ready to sell our final stage. And we're just watching the community grow and grow each month and each year. As Anna mentioned, we're more than 50% open space. We're an environmental net gain project and a real big emphasis on those shared spaces, the community spaces, incidental interactions and social sustainability. But we're probably more known for the environmental side of things. Like I mentioned, we're averaging over 8 stars in our homes. We've featured Victoria's first 10-star home. Energy bills from as low as $500 per year. And many of the homes at the Cape have no energy bills whatsoever. Of course, there's no gas. We recycle a lot of our rainwater and reuse it on site. We've got a really big community farm, which is nearing completion after the pilot was done about 5 years ago. Lots of, we're right on the water, so we make a point of water-sensitive urban design. Lots of areas for connection to nature. We're seeing a lot of little baby echidnas and baby wombats and baby birds, all sorts of endangered and non-endangered varieties, kangaroos, that sort of stuff. At the moment, yeah, the Cape.
Thank you very much, Clint. Next is Sally Mcguire, who's a resident of Shepherd's Ground Farm and Village in New South Wales' Lower Hunter Valley, where members are working towards the creation of a small, sustainably built rural village within a farm setting. Hi, Sally, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yes, so I am a resident at Shepherd's Ground Farm and Village, which is in the Lower Hunter Valley in New South Wales. Shepherd's Ground it's quite a groundbreaking project, unique to New South Wales and unique to Australia, and that's because of the way it was set up as a rural land share community under the SEP 15. And we also exist under a company structure rather than a co-op structure or anything else. So we are on a 277 acre parcel of land that has been set up under that SEP 15. And the aim of that legislation, and indeed the aim of Shepherd's Ground, is to encourage and facilitate the development of rural land sharing communities, which are committed to environmentally sensitive and sustainable land practices. Shepherd's Ground members come from a wide variety of career backgrounds. So a lot of us here are working outside of where we live, as well as perhaps pursuing some kind of regenerative land practice or farming practice on site. Some of the tenets of Shepherd's Ground are sustainability, which of course is a really broad term encompassing many things, but we like to think of it as across all aspects of living as well as farming. We would love to be organic one day, but we're definitely chemical free. We've got room for biodynamics, and a lot of people practice that out here. We support local. We are very, large on collaboration within ourselves, but also within our community where we live in the Lower Hunter Valley. So shared facilities and resources to collectively manage our land and the land around us. Pooling of resources to economically develop a wide range of communal and rural living opportunities, including the construction of low-cost buildings. We've facilitated clustered housing. All of our houses exist in a small village area, and it's been clustered that way so that the rest of the land can be locked up for farming pursuits, and also to create opportunity for social interaction. That was one of the key points when designing the original master plan for the village. Yeah, so that's pretty much a bit of a synopsis on Shepherd's Ground.
Great, thanks Sally, it's nice to have you here. Our next panellist is Jo Theirfelder. I hope I got that right, Jo, pronunciation-wise. She's the Communications and Marketing Manager at the Witchcliffe Ecovillage, just south of Margaret River in WA. This community will eventually be home to around 750 residents, the first of whom moved in just a couple of months ago. Hi, Jo.
Hi, thanks for having me. So yes, the Witchcliffe Ecovillage is in its infancy. However, we've been running for about 12 years already, given just the planning and development of the development has taken us that long to sort of get through all the bureaucracy to get to the point now where we started construction last year. We think we've hit the zeitgeist at just the right time, it seems, with everything happening with COVID and so forth, because we've just had an explosion of interest and we're well ahead of where we thought we'd be in terms of sales. But at the moment, we've hardly done any marketing, and we're selling pretty much through word of mouth. And it's just so incredibly encouraging and rewarding to see the amount of interest in our project. So we're self-sufficient in water, energy, renewable energy, and fresh food produce. Like you said, we'll be home to about 750 odd members, residents eventually, as well as a tourism component as well. Margaret River is in a tourism region. So we have our main residential areas are in clusters around community gardens. We also have a large public realm as well, where we'll have a pub and a cafe and a food hub and a creative hub, and some mixed use facilities and a little backpackers hotel and a whole range of other facilities as well. So I think the local community that we're going to be a part of in Witchcliffe here, which is a really tiny little historic town, is pretty excited about all of those other infrastructure and amenities as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
Great, thanks, Jo. And finally, we have Melinda Marshall. She's Operations Manager at Cooperation Housing, which is currently facilitating the development of the Kyloring, I think you say, housing cooperative, which in turn is part of Witchcliffe Ecovillage, which Jo was just talking about. And the Kyloring housing cooperative is specifically designed for older people looking to downsize and live in community for successful and enjoyable ageing in place. Hi, Melinda.
Hi there. Yeah, well, I'm actually the operations manager for a not-for-profit community housing provider called Cooperation Housing, and we specialise in housing cooperatives. We currently have 5 members and approximately 50 dwellings that we help to manage. The thing about housing cooperatives is it's actually the tenants that cooperate together to manage their own dwellings and developments, and we're just there as an umbrella organisation to help them out if needed. So anything from bookkeeping to organising long-term maintenance plans and things like that. And one of our other remits is to help grow the housing cooperative sector, which we've been around for 10 years, and this is the first new one that we've been able to get off the ground, thanks to the Witchcliffe Ecovillage giving us an option agreement over the land. Because one of the key things with doing a housing cooperative is having a patient landowner who's willing to wait while you get the future residents together to then co-design the development with them. So I'm actually here today in lieu of my colleague Ojani Stockman, because she's running the first what we call the Kickoff Workshop with a few of the future residents. So it's a weekend-long workshop where they're learning all about the process and what is going to be involved as effectively owner builders as a group. So rather than building an individual dwelling, they're going to be collaborating together to build a small neighbourhood of approximately 25 dwellings. And unlike other development-led or developer-led projects, they will get to choose what shared amenities they have. They get to choose the layout, the floor plans for their dwellings, and in the process create a close-knit community whilst they're going through that design process. So it's not quick, but at the end of the day, they'll have something that will suit their needs and allow them to truly age in place. Our research shows that these type of communities, they can have stay in them longer than having to move into a nursing home, because they can potentially have a nurse live on site. And I think, especially after what happened with the outcomes of the aged care Royal Commission, a lot of people are quite hesitant to move into aged care facilities, and what we're offering is effectively allowing them to create their own aged care facility, something that they can truly age in place.
Great, thanks, Melinda. Okay, so we're going to be just having a discussion about this topic for the next 40 minutes or so. So everybody listening, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible. I'd just like to start by asking all of you on the panel, what do you think are the main benefits of eco-villages and co-housing setups, particularly for sustainability? Who'd like to start?
Well, I can have a go at that. I mean, one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about co-housing is because of the sustainability benefits. There's lots of research that proves that people that live in co-housing find it a lot easier to be sustainable because they share the responsibility of, you know, maintaining the veggie patch or composting or looking after the chickens and that type of thing. So yeah, there's definitely research that backs up that living in co-housing is more sustainable. Not only from that perspective, but also from the social side of things, because there's more neighbourliness involved in co-housing, which in turn means that people, so, you know, they don't feel as lonely as other people that live in individual dwellings.
Mm-hmm. Clint, you're nodding. You got something to add to that?
Yeah, look, I agree with Melinda entirely that you know, that connectedness is really important, you know, for the social isolation side of things, but also with the environmental sustainability. We know that we at the Cape, the village has been designed so that there's these lots of shared spaces, lots of open space, but there's also the opportunity for private privacy inside the home and private open space. But because of the social sustainability features, things like ensuring there's pocket parks throughout the park, throughout the estate, the easiest way to get around the Cape and to the shops and the beach and all sorts of amenity nearby is cycling and walking. So that encourages that incidental interaction, reduces emissions associated with, you know, car travel and whatnot. And during COVID, we've just found that the community down there weathered that quite well, because they got to see each other from a safe distance almost as often as they would have otherwise. Still have those conversations and that sort of stuff. I think, yeah, so the connectedness and everything that comes from that, including the knowledge share. So lots of residents have their own different passions and talk about recycling, upcycling, battery tech. There's music nights and all sorts of community-led programs. And one that comes to mind at the moment is a koala habitat restoration program, which the community at the Cape has created and led and we've supported. So koalas haven't been seen in the region for some time, and it's already had some success with some koalas spotted on site just last month. Yeah, and that's the sort of stuff that you know, co-housing and eco-villages kind of fosters that sort of interaction, those sorts of initiatives and sharing sort of mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got to agree. By far the main reason why people are coming to the Ecovillage, the Witchcliffe Ecovillage, is for community. I mean, it's almost a given in many respects that ecovillages will tick the boxes in terms of environmental sustainability and even economic, but it's that more intangible social sustainability and that coming together of community and knowing your neighbours and having that, as Clint said, that incidental connections. That is by far and away the reason why people are coming to the Witchcliffe Ecovillage and wanting that connection that we've been missing, that we miss in, you know, in suburbia so often, where you don't even know your neighbours. So much of our actual urban design, which all of our residential areas are in what we're calling our clusters. So they're in a 19 to 25 roughly houses per cluster, and it's almost like a micro community within the bigger community, and that's very much to encourage that interaction. So yeah, I agree.
Sally.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything everyone's saying. It's the same for us. But speaking to the main benefits, yeah, I guess of co-housing, but also for us, house construction, definitely sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing information, you know, for construction, we company purchased scaffold, so everybody had access to that, which was, you know, amazing. Yeah, sharing knowledge and information when it comes to lifestyle, being low waste, what kind of compost toilet to use, what kind of solar to get, all those things are major benefits. And then we're working towards a point of, which we already do and has come to the fore during this COVID period, but having a little village economy. So just a really basic sort of trade, swap, sell kind of, you know, veggies for honey, you know, a whittled wooden spoon for a repair of a tractor or something like that. So, but yeah, it's absolutely, you know, and that sort of stuff, again, then plays back into and facilitates that kind of social interaction and yeah, that people obviously, especially in this time, are craving.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm getting quite a few questions in the chat along the lines of how your initiatives, your various eco-villages and co-housing setups began. Were they established by a few people acting as developers? Was it just kicked off by a few people chatting or something else? And can you talk about the financial structures to get that, and I suppose legal structures as well, that you adopted, that your particular development adopted to get started? So can of worms topic, I know.
At the Ecovillage, at the Witchcliffe Ecovillage here, we're a developer-led project. We're a joint venture, 50-50 joint venture between Sustainable Settlements, which is the company that I work for, Mike Hume's company, and then the Perrin Group, which is a multidisciplinary property company. They're essentially acting as the bank, a silent partner. So we are wholly privately funded, which has far and away been able, is what has enabled us to be as innovative as we are. If we had to, like I mentioned, we've been in we were in planning for nearly 10, 11 years before we got to the point of starting construction. And it's taken us that long to get through the bureaucracy, if you will, of getting here. So we wouldn't have been able to get that far if we'd had been in normal bank financial lending scenarios. So yeah, we've got that surety of income, which has enabled us to do this, and it's also enabled us to spend a lot of money on making sure that this project is really high quality. So just some of the simple infrastructure that we've put in is at a level that you wouldn't see in most subdivisions. So just, for example, you know, some incredibly gorgeous handmade stone walls that throughout all of our village square that we've spent well over $1 million on. You know, that sort of level of quality into some of the public and shared facilities is pretty great. So that's what has enabled us to do what we've done. Yeah.
So I just want to point out that Joe's, that the Witchcliffe Ecovillage is an example of a very large scale eco-village, and that, like I said in my introduction, it's possible to do an eco-village or co-housing on all kinds of scales, from even just 2 or 3 households on a suburban block. There's lots of different governance models and financing models for this kind of setup. So if the developments that we're talking about today with our panelists don't quite fit what you think you'd like to do, then don't despair. There are plenty of other ways to do it.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of eco-village are often in intentional communities, so a small group of people coming together and doing it that way. Ours is rather different in that it's much more sort of, I guess, mainstream in its setup as a developer-led initiative. Yeah,
I think that's probably true for the Cape as well, Clint.
Yeah, the same. I think probably for the Cape. Yeah.
And yet, Sally, I think Shepherd's Ground has gone about things in a rather a different way to that. You want to tell us a little bit about how your
Shepherd's Ground
came to be?
Absolutely. We're at the opposite end of the spectrum. So a woman called Lucy Bruville, who comes from the local area, who grew up around here, spent 8 years living in France and really lived in a rural French village and wanted to, and where they had little village economy and they had land around them where they did farming and they had little artisan pursuits and food growing and that sort of thing. So when she came back to Australia, she wanted to recreate something like that. So that's what she did. She knew of this parcel of land from growing up. And essentially, we're only 7 years old next March. So during that time, she the finances were done through like peer-to-peer loans, those original few shareholders. So we're set up as a company structure with a board. People bought in with shareholders. They got together with peer-to-peer loans to purchase the land. And now from there, we have that shareholder structure. We have almost sold all of our plots, and we're very small. There'll only ever be 27 homes. And so 27 individual homes clustered around the village. And then there's 3 sort of shareholdings left, or 3 positions left for co-housing. We also want to facilitate that whole cradle to the grave living, so that we can have shared co-housing, so that our older members can move down there when they need more help, or maybe for woofers or uni students or something like that. And it's also more economically viable. So yeah, it's just a completely different structure on a completely different scale. So
yes, I know that perhaps this is truer of smaller developments, but there's often a common house built into the to the plan that is a bit of a shared space and managed by the community, which is, you know, and quite often that common house does provide maybe short-term accommodation, which allows the private houses to be smaller and not have guest rooms, for example. Sounds like that's something you're planning, something along those lines, Sally. For your
yes, similar. Yes, very much so. And you know, a community hall, and you know, we have already shared common facilities with a kitchen, and where we can have events and meetings and all that sort of thing. But yes, definitely, yeah, shared co-housing.
Yeah. So what are the major challenges to understanding the best ownership model for co-housing? There are so many out there. What do you recommend that people consider, or is that too hard a question given the scope of the, you know, the wide range of sizes and aims for these kind of communities?
And are you talking about just co-housing here, or eco-villages as well?
The question relates to co-housing. So I suppose that I guess the Cape and also Witchcliffe have come at the Ecovillage from a sort of a standard developer model, albeit with, you know, eco design guidelines and a different approach to shared space and so forth. But so perhaps this question relates more to the kind of development that Sally's involved with.
Well, certainly from the Witchcliffe Ecovillage, we're not co-housing in a way. So Melinda's probably can speak to the co-housing element that we might have within the Witchcliffe Ecovillage. We're not co-housing in that the people can buy in as they would to a strata lot. They own quite a lot of area in common. So our lots are strata titled lots, which enables them, each lot owner, to then own the community gardens that they cluster around in common. And we've also got a non-for-profit company called Ecovillage Commons, which owns our dams and our conservation areas and our wastewater vegetation areas. And all of that is then also owned in common, so just for residents to have. So those are the strata sort of models that we follow. A little bit different to co-housing. We don't have the same sort of thing, but Melinda might be able to talk about it from Kyloring's perspective.
Yeah, Melinda, have you got anything to add to?
Yeah, well, obviously we're using the cooperative model, so it's a member-owned organisation that will effectively own the property, and then the residents will then have a membership, and their buy-in for that will be equivalent to whatever the cost of their dwelling, and the share in the common facilities will be. And that's most co-housing developments around the world either use a housing cooperative model or sometimes a community land trust model. In Australia, we're a little bit behind as far as the financing side of things. And so there are a few co-housing communities that have just used a company structure to develop. But yeah, we obviously believe that the cooperative model is best, and that's what we're using to facilitate this project. From a financing point of view, we just like any owner builder, we are requiring people to input about 30% of the cost in order to us then finance the rest of it. But we are also talking to government about getting some funding so that we can provide some social and affordable housing in the mix as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. And I guess that leads into my next question, which comes from one of our attendees. They write that connection in the community is very important and created community is valuable on all levels. But how about connection with the surrounding community? How do you prevent the negative aspects of a closed community? You were talking before, Joe, about the positive impact that Witchcliffe Ecovillage is having on the small existing town of Witchcliffe.
Yeah,
is there thought put into that relationship?
Oh, absolutely. Witchcliffe is a very tiny little town, historic little town, so just 10 k's south of Margaret River. We absolutely want, so our site is 120 hectares, which is significantly bigger than the actual footprint of the existing town. So when we're finished, we will become Witchcliffe essentially. So becoming part of the community right from the very beginning was very important. So we had community hall, we had meetings in the community hall. We engaged with the community. The residents of the street directly adjacent to us, we had quite a lot of one-on-one discussions with them. We've resolved it. We had a few issues in regards to the location of a particular car park, and we resolved those issues with them directly. And so now, certainly from my perspective, I'm in constant daily contact with on the coalface of communications. And my feeling is that the community is really, really supportive of us. For a little sort of regional rural community, I don't think that there's any kind of development that would be better suited in terms of values than the Witchcliffe Ecovillage for this town. So we're very lucky that I guess not lucky, but we're very happy to have the support of the local community. And I think, to be honest, they're very excited about getting a pub soon. Because there's no pub currently in Witchy, no. But there'll be a lot of amenities that we're far from a closed community. We will be very much open to the entire region. Our food hub will become a regional distribution hub for food, all grown locally in the area. We will have lots of public amenities. We'll have a nature playground. All of these sorts of facilities are open to the whole public. So we never ever wanted to become a closed community. That's not our intention. So,
how did it work at the Cape with relation to the town of Cape Patterson for your development, Clint?
Yeah, and it's got a fair few similarities to Witchcliffe in that the Cape takes up a large space, about 40 hectares, and the town of Cape Patterson is quite a small village on the coast there, so it represents a really big increase in land area of the town, although we're 230 lots versus about 900 homes in the existing town prior. But during the master planning phase, it was important that we really gave good consideration to the existing community, how the community as a whole, once the Cape development was finished, would function and would work. Huge amounts of the amenity and the infrastructure that we're adding to the area. That's things like a sports precinct, got a really big, lovely children's playground. There's a huge community farm, got wetlands, an off-leash dog park, all these types of things, little amphitheatre and various parks. We made sure that they were sited right next to the existing town, so which almost becomes the centre of the final town. To really encourage people who are the existing residents and visitors to Cape Patterson to come on in and to use that infrastructure and to mix in with everybody. We're finalising the constitution in coming months for the community farm, and it's important to make sure that there was space in the community farm for people from the Cape development, but also people from broader Cape Patterson and beyond as well, to make sure there's really good integration and good opportunity for everyone to be involved and enjoy the space. So it's holistic, and we need to think about it from the get-go. We see that people walking and cycling through the Cape every hour of the day just about are from the local area. It's really important that they come through and they use the space and they cycle past the wetlands and they see the kangaroos and all the birds and that type of stuff.
Sally, did you, how did it work with you and your wider community where Shepherd's Ground's is being built?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're in a small little, we call it like area, suburb called Butterwick. And yeah, there was a lot of community consultation because it was obviously the same sort of process as far as our council was concerned as setting up a development. So notifying everyone, lots of meetings in the local community and town halls. But yeah, I would definitely, I definitely think that even sort of when we were setting this up, so say, 7 years ago, starting to talk about it, because we did get it through quite quickly in terms of through council and that sort of process. But, these types of, eco-villages, where a rural land sharing community, which has a different sort of connotation as well. So, in some ways you are overcoming a mindset. Maybe not everybody does want to have that in their community. But we also, so we have spent a lot of time getting the information out there, but it is a pretty tight-knit community around here. There are a lot of people growing food. We have an awesome slow food Hunter Valley organisation. So right from the start, we're already working with these people, but make sure that we are working together and collaborating. And we still continue to do that. So when we think about our community, yes, we have our community within our village, but we also think about our community in Butterwick, Woodville, Morpeth. These are our local areas. We all attend each other's farm gates. We go to the Slow Food Hunter Valley, Levy Market, and all that sort of thing. So it definitely, is so important to take into consideration your community, to keep them informed and to, just keep all those relationships maintained. And it's actually really wonderful to see people interested in what we're doing to come out. And it's really wonderful to actually go and visit what everyone else is doing around here and all learn how we can best support each other and work together.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sally. I'm just wrangling questions here. There's a few that are coming through about private ownership. I think that perhaps when many of us hear about co-housing or eco-villages, we imagine the kind of intentional community, kind of hippie commune style of place to live. And I think that it's fair to say that has actually evolved a lot in the last couple of decades in Australia. And now there are many different setups or mechanisms that are being used to create this kind of sustainable community, intentional community. There's also a million names for it: collaborative housing, co-housing, eco-village, and so on. And of course, they do differ as you can see just from the developments that are represented today in scale and in intention and so forth. But there's some questions. It's a very long-winded way of saying that I'm getting some questions about how private ownership works. How can people get a mortgage to buy into a co-op since they'd have no title to offer a lender? How does the passing on of homes to children work when a resident dies? That's particularly for you, Melinda. How do you convince banks or other lenders to place monetary value on shared space and amenities? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on those questions.
Well, I think I did touch upon it earlier that in Europe and North America, etc., the banks are on board. It's been around, for quite a while in those places, and so we are having to finance it as if we are our owner builder, so at least a 30% equity in order to get finance, which does, not really allow everybody to contribute. But once we have more of these developments off the ground and we can demonstrate, how that they aren't that risky as what the banks currently think them to be, then more and more will get on board. And we're in particular talking to member-owned banks who are familiar with, sort of co-ownership models. and that's been quite encouraging. So yeah, I mean, one of the other things too is that as an owner builder, you are effectively getting your housing at cost. So it is, whilst it might be a lot to get in, it's still actually a lot more affordable than if you were to buy a normal house off the market.
Does anybody else want to jump in with some thoughts on that question?
I can just jump in really quickly. Yeah, I can just jump in really quickly and say that the way that we're set up with, yes, you buy shares, so land share community, you buy shares that entitles you to your plot of land and where you can build your house. But yeah, it's definitely our experience, and the experience of our members has been that it's quite difficult to get financing from banks, from non-traditional lenders, from pretty much, you know, that mainstream sector in Australia. And yeah, we're aware too that what's been happening overseas in a similar with similar setups is that financial institutions are a lot more on board, and it is definitely difficult to prove because you don't have the title deed to the land because it's owned by the company in which you hold the shares. So it has been one of the challenges to becoming part of Shepherd's Ground as we're set up in our model.
And what happens if someone down the track wants to move away and effectively sell their house, Sally? What's the mechanism for that?
Well, we're set up like a not-for-profit, so you can never profit off the sale of your shares. So you sell your shares for what you bought them for, but certainly your house is considered your chattel, so you can sell it for whatever you can get, whatever you value it at. But then in our structure as well, because it is a membership process, and it's the same if you pass away and leaving your shares and your house to family or whomever, there is a membership approval process. So you can't just sell your shares and your house or gift them or will them or whatever, because those people who are going to be living here would have to go through the same membership process that we all go through to join Shepherd's Ground. And that's sort of an extensive sort of 6-month get to know you on both sides, reference checks and that sort of thing. So yeah, it does make it a bit tricky, especially when you look at, when you passing it on to family and that sort of thing. So yeah, those are
so something to be aware of when buying.
Yeah, our situation is the same as that, but I'll also add that we've actually already got a waiting list for people that have brought individual lots in the Ecovillage who are keen to move into Kyloring at a later date. So we're pretty confident that nobody will have a problem selling their shares on when they need to.
That's great to hear. It's really excellent to hear that this kind of model is gaining so much momentum in Australia. It's very exciting. I'd like just a quick plug from me. There's an article that we ran in Sanctuary about 18 months ago. I think it was Sanctuary 51, called Better Together, which investigates co-housing and more collaborative housing broadly, and the different models that are available, including speaking to a handful of people who are already doing it. So I encourage you to go and have a read of that article for a little bit more background.
I guess I just wanted to say at the Witchcliffe Ecovillage, we're much more of a traditional sort of model in that you own. Our lots are strata titled. You own your lot. It's just like a green title, but being strata, it enables you to own the community garden in common. And then as being part of the Ecovillage as a whole, that Ecovillage Commons not-for-profit that I mentioned, we all own, which means that all of the residents of the Ecovillage own assets like our incredibly huge big dams, for example. So all of those, the recreation that can happen in those dams and the potential aquaculture industries and all of that, the conservation areas, the riparian zones, the wetland areas, the avocado orchard and all of those sorts of things, they are all owned by residents just for having a block of land there. So it's quite different, I guess, from co-housing, but it's, when you buy in the Ecovillage, you're buying your little block of land, so you get that privacy, but you also get the balance of having all of those shared facilities and extra amenities. So to me, it feels like a really lovely balance somewhere between that sort of mainstream. You have your private ownership and you hold that, but you also get all of these incredible community assets as well. So I think that's a really lovely balance that we're striving.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the same, I think, with the Cape, Clint, and yeah, just to make the point that what Sally was talking about before with approval of residents and so on and so forth, that's a feature of some co-housing models and not of others. Either at the Cape or at Witchcliffe, my understanding is that if you needed to move away, you just sell your house. And
right, yeah, no private ownership,
yeah.
strata title, just like Joe mentioned. With that ownership in common of all of the community assets we're talking about. So there's, you know, community buildings, big farms, you know, all sorts of sports stuff. So yeah, people buy and sell as they ordinarily would. Yeah.
So there's no doubt about the social benefits of shared living. This is another question that's come in. But sometimes the closer contact gives rise to personal differences and conflict. Do any of you have particular rules and understandings to resolve such conflict in your communities?
Yeah, at Witchcliffe, so we're again still in our infancy in terms of we've only got one resident at the moment, one lucky brave resident, but I think by the end of this year we'll probably have a dozen, and it's going so fast. So, but we have strata bylaws that through that we'll be having we're going to be using a model called consensus decision making. It's sort of rolled into our strata bylaws. There's lots of different decision-making models out there, but this is one that we decided to use. Sociocracy is another one that people are looking at that's a little bit more complicated. We're pretty much going to start simply. Each of our clusters, our residential clusters, are stratas themselves, and they have their own strata council. So each of those clusters then sort of operate as their own little micro communities, but they are all beholden to the same sort of strata bylaws. And we're hoping that these consensus decision making basically just makes we'll be running workshops on that when we hand over the clusters to, you know, the strata councils to the community, and yeah, just hoping that those basic sort of models will be a good place for people to start.
And similarly at the Cape, we have a set of OC rules which fall under the OC Act, and that stipulates all of the, I guess, the high level things that people can and can't do. They're quite straightforward things and things that you would expect. Our design guidelines are tied to those OC rules as well. So that talks about different things that you can do within your property. For example, no front fences to keep the village with an open feel. It has some restrictions around, say, front yard landscaping and keeping that native and, you know, in line with the rest of the landscaping across the village. But generally, it's quite of a standard sort of approach. We know that the diversity is key to the success of our village. So there's lots of little groups, subgroups. There's a OC committee and subcommittees who, where they have a passion for a particular project, they'll jump on board and they'll really push that along. And if people aren't so keen to be involved with, you know, the community farm, for example, they might have a passion in, you know, documenting birds on site, or their passions might lie somewhere else. And that's all facilitated and allowed. And there's a conflict resolution process through the owners corporation, as you'd probably see standard with all owners corporations.
Yeah. Sally, what about you in your much smaller, more community-led development? How do you handle conflict?
Yes, well, we are a lot smaller at the moment. I think we have about 9 households and family groups living on site. So we're in the infancy of this as well. But so we have a community management statement, which, you know, sets out a lot of, similar to what Clint was saying, like, you know, things about fences and aesthetics. We have a build code, which also addresses those sorts of things as well. But in terms of day-to-day management, we have 4 working groups set up, and one of those, and every member has to join 1 or 2 working groups, and as part of their sort of monthly contribution to the project, donate some hours, and whether that is indeed tree planting if you're part of the farm and environment group, or discussing water pumps. There's a social and cultural group, and their remit is to, facilitate social harmony and look at grievance procedures and, make sure that, grease the wheels of the social wheels, I guess. So yes, ours is sort of informal, but it's definitely vital that we have something in place, and we do have that, and but indeed, it was interesting to hear everyone else's ideas, because I think that ours does need more finessing and perhaps some more structure as well, because it's really important that the social harmony is, and the social hygiene is just so important, especially perhaps when you are in such a smaller community as we are.
Absolutely. So we're almost out of time already. So I thought I'd just ask for, one final question, and then I'll ask for your final hot tips. How much do you think the commercial success of the Cape and Witchcliffe Ecovillage will influence more conventional developments to be more sustainable? What aspects of Ecovillage design and living are most easily transferable? Clint?
I'll just say, in a word, yes. And that's a big part of the mission of the Cape, is to mainstream sustainable housing and sustainable communities. We're a relatively small estate at 230 odd lots, which is big enough to demonstrate that this can be done, and this can be managed well and be profitable. Pardon me, but to have a material impact on the industry, and offer everyone able to buy into similar eco-villages across the state and across the country. More developers need to follow the lead of the Cape by dedicating more space to open space, and more consideration for community in the master plan design, and of course all the environmental sustainability side of things. Initially, we're talking with different developers around Victoria to encourage them and help them to improve their estates, to reduce carbon emissions primarily, but also to build better communities across the country. Gas-free, that's an absolute no-brainer, and depending on a range of factors, 7-star minimum is often a good place for larger developers to start. And they're 2 of the big ticket items. And then we're getting into, future proofing. So making sure that we're efficient all electric, and that we're going to allow for, EV. So all of our homes come pre-wired for EV chargers in the garage. Easy to do. You don't have to put the charger in immediately, which is the expensive part, but, heavier gauge cable makes it easy for that to happen in the future. And then I'd probably say just engaging with some experienced designers and architects in the early days, so that the architects, designers and builders who are involved with a project know how to do a building or a development at an affordable price. And we often say that it costs just as much to put a window in the wrong place as it does to put it in the right place. And if the people involved in the whole process understand that from the get-go, that there's good, affordable ways to deliver sustainable homes, it makes it more achievable for everybody. It doesn't rub up any builders the wrong way and force prices up and make it unattainable for some people.
So
I would just say that the Witchcliffe Ecovillage, we've always been hoping that this will be a model for not just Australian developers, but across the world. All of our IP is open source. Everything that we've done is available for anyone to follow. We know we're being watched very closely by industry at the moment, and we encourage that, and we encourage questions. We want to be copied, essentially, because we're doing such great work here, and we know that we're sort of right at the cutting edge of this. So we want as many people to follow in our footsteps as possible, because this should be the way that we're developing. This should be the way that this should be what people demand, this kind of lifestyle and this kind of amenities, and you know, we're showing what's possible. And so there's no reason why developments should continue to be unsustainable when we're showing that it is possible. So
thanks, Jo. And I'll just throw very quickly to Melinda and Sally for your final biggest hot tip or pitfall to avoid for people who are interested in living in a sustainable community like an eco-village or a co-housing setup. What's your takeaway?
Well, from a housing co-op perspective, it would be like when we touched upon about the social side, we're using sociocracy, and we're making sure that and we're teaching people how to use sociocracy from day one. That's we've actually got an expert facilitator that's running this workshop this weekend. So it's really important to make sure that you invest in that side of things.
Okay.
And you know, we really do need to sort out the financing side of these things, because we've got a long waiting list of people that are just waiting for us to announce another housing co-op, especially in the Perth metro area. Keep on being told all the time that they want one here. So yeah, if there's any patient landowners out there that are willing to let us sign an option agreement to get one done, then feel free to contact us.
Thanks, Melinda. Sally, what's your takeaway?
Look, from my perspective, I believe there are really so many benefits that far outweigh anything else of living in sort of any of these structures that we're talking about. And I just think that you need to be, you know, fully aware and go in with your eyes open, because you will reap great benefits. But of course, there's going to be some hard work there as well. And whether it's, you know, financially getting off the ground, or just making sure that, you know, yeah, you're there being part of social cohesion and decision-making processes and that sort of thing. And yeah, my hot tip is the more work that can be done as groundwork. And I mean, we didn't have, you know, a development model or a lot of money behind us, but we're doing the work now. But those structures, when they're put in place, they really can help guide you. And I think that can help avoid pitfalls as well.
Great. Thank you, Sally. So that's unfortunately all we have time for in this session. It flew by. Thank you very much, Clint, Sally, Jo and Melinda, for sharing your time and expertise today. And thank you to all our attendees for tuning into this Sustainable House Day session and for your questions. There were many, many that we didn't get to. I'm sorry about that. If you haven't already, you can check out some of the homes in our panelists' eco-villages and communities, as well as all the other participating homes, obviously, by visiting sustainablehouseday.com. And if you do have any questions, burning questions that we weren't able to answer today, you can comment on the online house profiles and ask them of the homeowners and designers, and in this case, Ecovillage facilitators directly. Thank you again, and please stick around for our upcoming sessions.